Reno, Nevada, March 3rd, 2014, 4:12 a.m. The casino floor is almost empty at this hour. Surveillance cameras capture what appears to be routine maintenance. A slot technician in a Navy work uniform kneels beside a row of Wheel of Fortune machines. He opens access panels with practiced efficiency, removes components, logs numbers on his clipboard. Just another graveyard shift worker keeping the games operational for tomorrow's crowds. But the maintenance cart he wheels away from that row of machines doesn't hold broken circuit boards or worn coin mechanisms. Hidden beneath a layer of spare parts and tools are dozens of metal cash boxes, each one stuffed with bills. $29 million in payout cash, collected over a busy holiday weekend. Within minutes of loading his cart, both the technician and the money vanish into the pre-dawn silence of a sleeping city. Casinos spend millions on surveillance systems, security guards, and fraud detection software to catch cheaters and card counters. But sometimes the biggest threat isn't the gambler trying to beat the system from the outside. Sometimes it's the invisible worker with the keys to the vault who understands exactly how the money flows through the machines. Before we dive into one of the most brazen inside jobs in casino history, hit that subscribe button, drop a like if you're ready for an incredible story, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. You're going to want to stick around for this one. To understand how $29 million can walk out of a casino undetected, you need to understand the life of Eddie Ramirez. 34 years old, quiet, methodical, with the kind of face that blends into any crowd. For 7 years, Eddie had been one of the dozens of slot machine technicians who kept Reno's casinos running 24 hours a day. $19 an hour to maintain machines that could generate thousands in a single jackpot. Marcus Chen worked alongside Eddie at the Silver Strike Casino for 3 years. He remembers Eddie as the guy who never complained, never called in sick, never caused drama, just showed up, did his work, and went home. In an industry full of personalities and egos, Eddie was practically invisible. That invisibility was both his greatest asset and his deepest frustration. Dr. Patricia Williams, a psychologist who studies workplace crime, explains that employees in gaming environments often develop what she calls proximity resentment. They handle millions of dollars every day, watch customers win and lose fortunes, but their own financial struggles remain unchanged. The contrast between the money flowing around them and their personal financial reality can become psychologically unbearable. Eddie's reality was a cramped one-bedroom apartment 20 minutes from the Strip, where he lived alone after his wife left him in 2011. The divorce had been expensive, and his credit cards were maxed out from legal fees and the cost of maintaining 2 households during the separation. Maria Santos, Eddie's ex-wife, speaking by phone from her current home in Sacramento, explains that money was always the source of their problems. Eddie would come home frustrated, talking about gamblers who made more in one lucky spin than he made in a month. He'd watch people celebrate jackpots while he was earning barely enough to cover their rent. But Eddie's financial struggles were just the surface of a deeper problem. Because unlike most casino employees, Eddie had something that made him truly dangerous: complete access to the machines that held all that money. Slot machine technicians are the mechanics of the gambling world. When a machine malfunctions, when coins jam, when software glitches, they're the ones who fix it. They carry master keys that open every panel, every cash compartment, every secure section of the machines they service. Bob Patterson spent 15 years as a casino security consultant, working with properties across Nevada. He explains that casinos spend enormous resources monitoring players for cheating, but they often overlook the biggest vulnerability: their own employees. A slot technician has more direct access to cash than most armored car drivers. Eddie worked the graveyard shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., when the casino was at its quietest. Fewer supervisors, fewer security guards walking the floor, minimal management presence. It was just Eddie and a handful of other technicians, spread across thousands of slot machines. And Eddie began to notice things that most people would never see. Working nights in a casino gives you a unique perspective on how money moves through the building. Eddie Ramirez had spent 7 years watching that flow, and he understood it better than almost anyone. Slot machines are essentially sophisticated cash collection devices. Players feed in money, the machine pays out based on programmed odds, and the excess cash accumulates in secure boxes inside each machine. During busy periods, especially after holidays or major events, Those boxes can hold tens of thousands of dollars each. Jennifer Walsh worked as a shift supervisor during Eddie's tenure at Silver Strike. She explains that slot technicians were trusted with maintaining the machines because they had to be. If a machine breaks down during peak hours, every minute of downtime costs the casino money. Technicians needed immediate access to fix problems quickly. That trust extended to the cash handling procedures. When technicians performed maintenance, they often needed to access the same compartments where payout boxes were stored. The assumption was that multiple security layers, cameras, logs, spot checks, would catch any theft attempts. But Eddie was studying those security layers, looking for gaps. Marcus Chen remembers Eddie asking unusual questions during their shifts. How often did management actually verify the cash logs? Who decided when payout boxes needed to be emptied? Which surveillance cameras had the best angles on the slot floor? At first, Chen thought Eddie was just curious about the business side of casino operations. Many technicians wondered how much money actually flowed through the machines they serviced. But Eddie's questions were more specific, more systematic. He was conducting research. Dr. Williams explains that successful inside thefts almost always involve extensive preparation. The perpetrator needs to understand not just the physical layout, but the human patterns, the technological systems, the administrative procedures. They're looking for the intersection of maximum opportunity and minimum risk. Eddie found that intersection during his regular maintenance rounds. Bob Patterson points out that casinos in 2014 were caught between old-school security thinking and modern technology. They had sophisticated surveillance systems watching players, but employee monitoring was often based on trust and periodic spot checks. The assumption was that staff theft would be small-scale, opportunistic, easily detected. Nobody was looking for someone systematically studying how to steal millions. During quiet periods on his night shifts, Eddie began conducting what he would later call dry runs. He'd approach a machine, open the access panels, and time how long it took to remove a payout box and replace it with an empty one. He practiced the hand movements, the positioning, the logging procedures. To anyone watching, it looked like routine maintenance. Jennifer Walsh explains that technicians often swap components during repairs. Replacing a faulty payout mechanism with a working one was standard procedure. The paperwork required logging the serial numbers, but in practice, supervisors rarely double-checked those numbers immediately. Eddie was learning that there was a gap between when cash boxes were removed and when their absence would be noticed. During busy periods, that gap could be hours, sometimes overnight. He was also mapping the surveillance coverage. Cameras focused on player areas to catch cheating, but the service corridors and maintenance areas had minimal coverage. A technician pushing a cart through employee-only areas wouldn't draw attention. Most importantly, Eddie discovered something about timing. After holiday weekends, when the casino was flush with cash from heavy gambling, the payout boxes were at their fullest. But the audit procedures remained the same. Boxes were counted during regular business hours, not immediately after being collected. By late 2013, Eddie had identified what he believed was the perfect target: the bank of Wheel of Fortune machines near the casino's main entrance. High-denomination slots that attracted serious gamblers. After a busy weekend, those 12 machines could easily hold over $2 million in combined payouts. But Eddie was thinking bigger than $2 million. He was thinking about every machine on the floor. February 2014 was particularly good for Nevada's casinos. A combination of Valentine's Day, President's Day weekend, and several major sporting events had drawn crowds to Reno's gaming establishments. The Silver Strike Casino had seen some of the heaviest action in its history. Casino manager David Morrison, speaking anonymously due to ongoing legal issues, explains that the weekend of March 1st to 2nd was exceptional even by holiday standards. High roller tournaments, packed slot floors, and a run of big jackpots had created an electric atmosphere. Players were winning, which meant they were playing longer and betting more. By Sunday night, the casino's slot machines were holding record amounts of cash. Eddie Ramirez knew this because he'd been tracking the patterns. As a technician, he had access to the machine performance reports that showed daily intake and payout ratios. He could see which machines were running hot, which areas of the casino were generating the most revenue. The numbers for that weekend were staggering. Bob Patterson explains that casinos typically empty payout boxes when they reach certain thresholds, but during exceptionally busy periods, they sometimes delay collections to avoid disrupting play. Players don't like seeing technicians working on machines during peak hours. This created an unusual situation. By Monday morning, March 3rd, many of the Silver Strike's slot machines were holding near maximum cash loads. Eddie had been waiting for exactly this scenario. Marcus Chen remembers Eddie seeming unusually focused during their Sunday night shift. He was more methodical than usual, double-checking his equipment cart, organizing his tools with extra precision. At the time, Chen assumed Eddie was just being thorough. In reality, Eddie was preparing for the biggest theft in casino history. The plan he'd developed over months of observation was elegantly simple. Instead of targeting individual high-value machines, he would systematically empty an entire section of the casino. Dozens of machines, hundreds of payout boxes, millions of dollars. And he would do it during a single shift, in full view of security cameras, disguised as routine maintenance. Jennifer Walsh explains that the graveyard shift on Sunday into Monday was always slow. Weekend crowds had gone home, and the casino was preparing for the slower weekday period. Management was minimal, security was focused on the few remaining players, and technicians were expected to perform maintenance that couldn't be done during busy hours. Perfect cover for what Eddie was planning. At 11:47 p.m. on March 2nd, Eddie Ramirez clocked in for what would be his final shift at the Silver Strike Casino. He loaded his maintenance cart with the usual tools and spare parts, but hidden beneath the surface layer were dozens of empty payout boxes he'd stolen over previous weeks. The swap was about to begin. Sunday night into Monday morning, March 3rd, 2014. The Silver Strike Casino was entering its quietest period of the week. A handful of dedicated gamblers occupied scattered machines, but most of the vast gaming floor was empty, waiting for Monday's crowds. Eddie Ramirez began his shift with routine maintenance tasks, working on machines that had reported minor glitches during the busy weekend. To anyone watching, he was simply the reliable technician doing his job. But at 12:30 a.m., Eddie began executing the plan he'd spent months developing. Marcus Chen was working the opposite side of the casino floor, handling his own assigned machines. He remembers seeing Eddie methodically working his way through the Wheel of Fortune bank, spending more time than usual at each machine. Nothing seemed unusual. Those machines had seen heavy play and likely needed extra attention. What Chen couldn't see was Eddie systematically removing cash-filled payout boxes and replacing them with empty ones from his cart. Each swap took less than 3 minutes, perfectly timed to match normal maintenance procedures. Security camera footage, later reviewed by investigators, shows Eddie opening access panels, working with components and logging numbers on his clipboard. His movements appear routine, professional, unremarkable. Even knowing what to look for, detectives would later admit it was nearly impossible to distinguish theft from legitimate maintenance. Bob Patterson explains that this is the hallmark of a sophisticated inside job. The perpetrator uses their legitimate access and knowledge to mask criminal activity. To security systems designed to catch outsiders trying to break in, an authorized employee doing their regular job is invisible. Eddie worked with methodical precision. Wheel of Fortune machines first, then the Bank of Blazing 7 slots, then the progressive jackpot games near the main walkway. Each machine yielded thousands of dollars in accumulated payouts. By 2:15 a.m., Eddie had emptied the cash boxes from over 30 machines, but he was just getting started. Jennifer Walsh explains that casino operations depend on trust between management and technical staff. When a machine shows up as serviced in the computer system, supervisors assume the work was completed properly. The detailed verification would come later, during regular audit procedures. Eddie was exploiting that trust window. At 2:30 a.m., he moved to the high-denomination slots near the VIP gaming area. These machines catered to serious gamblers who played $100 spins, and their payout boxes reflected that clientele. Single boxes containing $50,000 or more in mixed bills. David Morrison later estimated that the VIP section alone yielded over $8 million to Eddie's growing collection. The maintenance cart, designed to hold spare parts and tools, was being loaded with more cash than most people see in a lifetime. But Eddie's movements remained calm, professional, drawing no attention from the skeleton crew of security guards. At 3:45 a.m., Eddie took his scheduled break. He wheeled his cart to the employee break room, ostensibly to grab coffee and review his maintenance log. In reality, he was conducting a crucial part of his plan. The break room had a service entrance that connected to the casino's loading dock area. During night shifts, this entrance was monitored by a single camera focused on the door itself. not the corridor beyond. Eddie spent 10 minutes transferring the most valuable payout boxes from his cart to a large maintenance bag, the kind technicians use to carry bulky replacement parts. To anyone watching, he was simply organizing his equipment. When he returned to the casino floor, Eddie continued his systematic emptying of machines. But now he was working faster, more efficiently. The initial nervousness had been replaced by focused determination. By 4 a.m., Eddie had accessed over 60 machines across multiple sections of the casino. His maintenance log showed routine service calls, component swaps, and minor repairs. Everything appeared normal. Marcus Chen would later tell investigators that around 4 a.m., he noticed Eddie seemed to be moving through machines more quickly than usual. But technicians often developed efficient routines, and Eddie had always been particularly methodical in his work. At 4:12 a.m., security cameras captured what investigators would later call the moment of no return. Eddie Ramirez, pushing his maintenance cart loaded with stolen cash boxes, walked calmly toward the service corridor that led to the employee exit. His shift wasn't scheduled to end for 3 more hours, but Eddie Ramirez was done working for the Silver Strike Casino. He was ready to disappear. 4:15 a.m., March 3, 2014. Eddie Ramirez pushed his maintenance cart through the service corridor toward the employee exit, just as he had hundreds of times during his 7 years at the casino. His badge worked perfectly at the security door. The night security guard nodded as Eddie passed through. Just another worker finishing up some task. But this time, Eddie wasn't coming back. In the employee parking lot sat a white panel van he'd rented 2 days earlier using a fake ID and cash deposit. The van was parked in a section with minimal camera coverage, tucked between larger vehicles that blocked sight lines to Eddie's cart. The transfer took 12 minutes. Box after box of cash, accumulated from over 60 slot machines, loaded into the back of the van. Eddie worked with the same methodical precision he'd used inside the casino, showing no signs of panic or haste. Security footage from the parking lot shows the van leaving at 4:38 a.m. By the time the casino discovered what had happened, Eddie would have a several-hour head start. But the genius of Eddie's plan wasn't just the theft itself, it was the delay built into the discovery process. Jennifer Walsh explains that slot machine audits typically occurred during day shift hours, usually between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. The machines Eddie had emptied would show normal activity logs, and the empty payout boxes wouldn't be noticed until the regular cash collection rounds. This meant Eddie had purchased himself nearly 8 hours before anyone realized money was missing. David Morrison describes that Monday morning as initially routine. The casino opened for business as usual, players began filtering in, machines began their normal operations. Nothing seemed amiss. The first indication of a problem came at 10:47 a.m. when a day shift technician reported that several Wheel of Fortune machines showed cash levels that didn't match their play activity from the weekend. The machines had generated significant revenue, but their payout boxes were nearly empty. Initially, management suspected a computer glitch or reporting error. These machines were known to have software quirks, and data inconsistencies weren't unprecedented. But when technicians began physically checking the machines, they found something impossible to explain. Box after box was completely empty, despite showing thousands of dollars in weekend activity. By 11:30 a.m., it was clear this wasn't a software problem. Bob Patterson explains that the moment casino executives realized they were dealing with theft, everything changed. The FBI was called, the Nevada Gaming Commission was notified, and every employee who'd worked the previous night became a suspect. But when investigators reviewed Eddie's time logs and maintenance records, everything appeared normal. His paperwork showed routine service calls, standard component swaps, typical repair work. It wasn't until security teams began reviewing hours of surveillance footage that they understood the scope of what had happened. Marcus Chen was called into a conference room at 2 p.m. and shown video of Eddie working on machines throughout the night. At first, Chen insisted nothing looked unusual. Eddie was just doing his job. It wasn't until investigators pointed out specific hand movements and timing patterns that Chen realized what he was seeing. His colleague hadn't been maintaining machines. He'd been systematically robbing them. The full audit took 18 hours to complete. When casino executives finally had accurate numbers, the scope of the theft was staggering. $29,400,000 in cash, stolen from 67 slot machines across multiple sections of the casino. It was the largest inside theft in Nevada gaming history. But Eddie Ramirez was already gone. FBI agents arrived at his apartment Monday evening to find it completely cleaned out. No furniture, no personal belongings, no indication that anyone had lived there recently. Neighbors reported seeing a moving truck over the weekend, but nobody had thought to question it. The rental van was found Tuesday morning in a long-term parking lot at the Reno airport, wiped clean of fingerprints and containing no evidence of its previous cargo. Eddie had vanished as completely as the $29 million he'd stolen. By Tuesday, March 4th, Eddie Ramirez was front-page news. The largest casino theft in Nevada history had drawn national attention, and the FBI launched a multi-office investigation led by Special Agent Lisa Rodriguez. Most casino thefts were either small employee skims or external robberies. A single worker stealing nearly $30 million was unheard of. Eddie's background offered few clues. Born in El Paso, moved to Nevada in 2005, steady maintenance work, no criminal record. His ex-wife Maria recalled him as increasingly bitter about money, but had no knowledge of a plan. Agents initially suspected accomplices tied to laundering operations, but evidence suggested otherwise. Financial records showed months of preparation, prepaid cards, cash withdrawals, a storage unit rented with fake ID, and a cash-paid van. Inside the unit, investigators found maps, schedules, and notes on casino surveillance, proof of meticulous planning. Airport footage later showed Eddie buying a ticket to Los Angeles with cash, but the trail vanished in the crowds of LAX. The FBI pursued leads worldwide, tracking potential sightings and monitoring suspicious transactions in a dozen countries. Colleagues were polygraphed, surveillance footage reviewed frame by frame, and bank accounts monitored. But Eddie had accounted for every layer of scrutiny. Psychologist Patricia Williams called it meticulous revenge planning, not an impulsive grab, but a calculated strike by someone who felt wronged. To co-workers like Jennifer Walsh, the betrayal was chilling. Eddie had seemed the model employee, quietly preparing to vanish. 6 months in, the FBI had thousands of pages of reports and leads across continents. But no Eddie, no money. He had planned the theft and his disappearance, with equal precision. Eddie Ramirez wasn't just missing. He had turned himself into a ghost. $29 million in cash doesn't vanish quietly. It has to be hidden, moved, and converted without drawing attention. For the FBI, that made Eddie Ramirez's theft especially hard to trace. Unlike digital crimes, stolen currency can circulate invisibly. But the volume of small bills meant vehicles, storage, and cover stories were required. Agents tracked suspicious cash purchases across the West, properties, cars, businesses, while also monitoring offshore havens. Months passed with no clear leads. Eddie's background as a slot machine technician gave him an edge. He knew surveillance systems and how to avoid leaving digital footprints. The forger who had built his IDs admitted Eddie had multiple identities, but couldn't say which one he now lived under. Theories split. He might have fled to a no-extradition country, blending into expatriate communities, or he could be dead, cut out by accomplices after the heist. Investigators searched his known storage unit, but found only planning materials, convinced he had more hidden stashes elsewhere. Tips poured in from around the world: Mexico, Bangkok, Vancouver, but none confirmed his location. Years of monitoring never uncovered evidence of Eddie laundering the fortune. Either he was exceptionally disciplined or gone before he could enjoy it. The Silver Strike Casino eventually recovered, tightening security and restricting technician access. But Eddie Ramirez and the $29 million he stole were never found.